I think we will, there's about 33 people in already, which is fantastic. Congratulations and welcome everyone. And you're all troopers because the Giants game is going on right now. And I'm sure some of our birders are both birders and baseball fans. So hopefully you've got it taped and you're going to enjoy the show here and then enjoy the Giants. So I have a few announcements to make and then a brief presentation on CBCs. So I'm going to mute everyone if I have that. And then I'm going to turn on my mic so that we don't get background noise. If you have something to interject, please unmute yourself and say what is important. So everyone is going to be muted. I'm turning on. Oh, that's weird. Oh, asked to unmute. So Monique, I've asked you to unmute. So you can unmute yourself, hopefully, and that'll work. So, so my first announcement is our weekly walks have been very successful. We've had over 20 people attending and they've seen a lot of great birds. Unfortunately, Andrew was called into work this weekend. And I've searched for capable leaders to take his place. And most of our capable leaders are in Monterey on our monthly field trip. And I'm going to be either in Monterey or Humboldt, depending on which way the winds flow with birds. So we are going to cancel this Saturday's weekly walk to Lake Hennessy. And I'm sure we will reschedule it next week. So stand by for our email e-blast about that field trip. We apologize. Our monthly trip is taking place in Monterey and various locations in Monterey, led by Bruce Thompson, one of our field trip coordinators. And they're going to have an exciting time down there. Let's see, my next announcement is we have been searching for an education coordinator, and we have a number of applicants who will be interviewing very soon. If anyone out there knows anyone with free time on their hands who wants to give up about 20 hours a week as an education coordinator with some birding background and education background who loves going into classrooms, please let me know as soon as possible and we'll put them on our interview list. We have a couple of candidates that look like they are experienced and will do a really good job. We're also still waiting. At this moment, Napa Valley Public Schools have not opened their doors to outsiders yet due to COVID. So we're hoping that that will happen very soon. And then we can begin making presentations to 4th and 5th graders and possibly even to some older kids as well. So I think, and the last thing, Robin Leung is right now in Hawaii, and he sent me a presentation on CBCs. Can everyone hear me all right? Can you raise your hand if you can hear me okay? Everything good? Okay, so I'm going to give a presentation for Robin since he is in Hawaii right now. And I'm going to share my screen. I better share it first. And let's see, here we go. Share. And now I'm going to present it. So one of our reasons for giving this announcement, sort of a prolonged announcement, is to try to encourage folks to participate in one of our 2 CBCs. We have one centered in the Benicia area and one centered just north of Napa in the Angwin area. So I want to give you just a brief history about CBCs. The Christmas bird count, in other words, was started in 1900 by a man, an ornithologist named Frank Chapman. It was actually proposed and started as an alternative to the Christmas side hunt. The side hunt was a contest that took place Christmas Day, where teams went out and shot as many birds and animals as they possibly could, and then they compared their piles of dead animals and birds, and whoever had the most was the winner. A really unfortunate thing, but it is insight into how much we've changed. Back in the 1900s, women were still wearing egret feathers and other feathers in their hats. In 1900, the very first year, Frank Chapman organized 27 different birding groups, mostly in the Northeast where he was centered, but some in Canada and some one in Pacific Grove. So there were 25 circles that very first year, and they counted 89 species and 18,000 birds. So the very first bird count in 1900 had 89 species. Well, in 2017, which is the last CBC that we have data for, there were 73,000 volunteers, over 2,500 count circles, and 56 million birds counted, with a record 2,636 species seen in North and South America. Is that pretty amazing how far we have come in that short amount of time? The count circles now are all over North America and a few in South America and in the Caribbean and Central America. And it takes place sometime between December 14th and January 5th. Observers can go out, however they can walk by foot, by car, by boat, by snowmobile, or just sitting at home counting the birds that come to their feeders. All the data is reported to the area's compiler, who puts it in a database and submits it to the regional review. So our first Christmas count started in Benicia. It's a 15-mile circle, as you can see by the map right here. And it takes place usually the second, I want to say the second Tuesday of December. And I'll check that with Robin. It might be the second Thursday, but it's one of the second days. It's not on a Wednesday to avoid duck hunting, and it's not on the weekend to avoid duck hunting as well, because many of the birds are seen on Grizzly Island, and we have special permission from duck clubs to go in and count ducks. So we count every bird that we can see and hear during the day, and at feeder watches as well. So the Benicia Christmas bird count started in 1930 by a man named Emerson Stoner. The interesting tidbit I have about that is that my very first teaching job was in Benicia, and Emerson Stoner's wife was the secretary of my school. So I got to meet him, and he was an egg collector and had an incredible collection that is now in the Western Foundation of Vertebrate Zoology's museum. So he ran the CBC with a friend for many years. Since he started, there have been actually 71 CBCs held in Benicia. There were a few not held during various wars, but that's how many CBCs we've had since 1930. That's pretty amazing. Right now, since 1971, Napa Solano began coordinating the count. It started with Frank Bayer, and typically they observed about 130 species. And 1 year they had over 220,000 individual birds counted. And notable species such as the clapper rail, which is now called the Ridgeways rail, and black rails at Benicia State Park caused multitudes of birders to flock to Benicia State Park, because the black rail is an endangered species and very difficult to find. I think 1 year, Lucas and I did the Benicia State Park count, and we found 7 black rails at Benicia State Park. So they're there, and we know several locations where they're hanging out. So let's see.
Mark?
Yep.
Did you see them or just hear them?
We actually saw a couple, but mostly just heard them, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, whoops. So this count, then in 1979, a man named John Lovio took over, and they tallied 150 species in 1984. And one of the reasons they did is he was the first person to get us into Grizzly Island gun clubs to count the ducks and the rails there. And he also initiated owling parties in the middle of the night to count owls. Well, then in 1989, our former president and our conservationist, Robin Leong, took over and coordinated, and he's actually been coordinating it since 1989. And Robin is in the process of eventually moving to Hawaii. And so he is looking for a co-coordinator. And that's one of my reasons for this presentation, is to see if anyone out there would work with Robin this year and next, learn the scope of what is required. It's not a huge task, but it does involve contacting folks when we enter their land and tabulating data. We have other people who can help with the data tabulation. So if anyone out there is really excited about Christmas bird counts, they're really fun. One of the things that John did is he involved a few more people. When Robin took over, he increased the number of participants from 45 to 70, and that made a huge difference. And now there in some years, there are over 100 people on the Benicia Christmas bird count. The result was they moved from not 130 species, not 150, but an average of over 160 species seen in that territory, that 15-mile circle centered on Highway 680. And typically an average of over 100,000 birds. It's amazing. He's been coordinating it for 30 years or more, and is now looking for someone to help out. So please give me a call, step forward if there's any way that you're willing to help out in some way with Benicia's Christmas bird count. So far on that count, we've recorded over 236 species. That's an amazing number for winter, okay? The high count one year was 179 species. So over the course of time, over 236 species have been seen. And in 2011, 179 in a single year. Notable species are things like a blue jay turned up in 2006. We've actually led the nation in the number of black rails and Virginia rails for many years. Not every single year, but many years. And then in some years, we've led the nation in the number of American bitterns and in the various ducks and hawks that are shown here. It's pretty amazing that Benicia can come up with more birds than Marin or other areas that have a lot of participants as well. So our other Christmas bird count is coordinated by Murray Berner. It's a 15-mile diameter circle, just like Benicia, that's centered just east of Angwin. So it includes Rutherford, St. Helena, Deer Park, Angwin, Pope Valley, and the edge of Lake Berryessa. This count, come on there, began in 1969. It was actually coordinated by Dr. Floyd Hayes, who presented to us last year on grebes, the grebes of Clear Lake. He's a biology professor at PUC. And then in 2009, Murray Berner began coordinating it, and Napa Audubon took over. And Murray has increased the number of participants from somewhere around 20-25 to over 50. And we have observed 212 species in that part of Angwin, which is truly amazing, and an average of over 135 species. It's a great way to start out your yearly list by seeing 135 species on the very first day of January. It kicks off the year in a great way. There are usually, the participants are divided into 9 different areas and 13 or 14 different groups that go out and look for birds. To several of the cool areas in the Angwin CBC, Lake Hennessy, Pope Valley. Angwin, the forests around Angwin have pygmy nuthatches and red crossbills. Moore Creek Park, many of you know of, and Land Trust, especially Wild Lake, are recent new locations that are going to add some birds. One year they found a goshawk, and bell sparrows have been seen somewhat regularly on this although they're starting to decline right now. But other amazing species, sandhill cranes, white-winged scoters, mountain chickadees, green-tailed towhees, yellow-bellied sapsuckers, a lot of very cool birds. And one of the things that's great about the Angwin is the number of owls. There are 8 species of owls that are typically heard or observed on that count. This count is held on January 1st. So citizen scientists come together, join us for one of these 2 CBCs. We'll be sending out e-blasts. So if you receive one and want to come, please contact the coordinator. We started many years ago with just a small group of people. It grew and grew until often most CBCs will have a dinner, a potluck, or a dinner following the event and share what they've seen. It's sponsored by so many different organizations. It's truly amazing. It's a really fun activity and a community building activity. The Christmas bird count was originally the first among all these different citizen science projects in terms of number of participants. I'm not sure it's possible eBird has passed it up, because eBird, which is basically collecting lists from everyone who goes into the field, has amassed, billions of different bird checklists. It's truly amazing, but it's right up there with all of those. And what have we learned from them? Well, one thing that we've learned is how species have declined over the years. This is the eastern Buick's wren, which is doing okay in the west, but the eastern variety is basically considered to be possibly extinct in the east. And someone has their speaker on. If you can turn that off, that'd be great. And then some birds have increased, like the American crow. I would prefer myself to have Buick's wrens flying around than crows, but crows have increased. So have the bald eagles. It really shows what a good job we're doing to protect the bald eagle and its environments. And then the other thing that comes from this is amassing the data of where birds are and where they're migrating. It's a picture into where they're migrating and really gives data as to what locations to protect in Central and South America, the wintering grounds for so many of our songbirds and other birds. So we wish you happy birding. Please come join us for one of our Christmas bird counts. And if you are interested in helping Robin out, please give me a call. My phone number is on the website, and I'd appreciate it if someone would step forward to help Robin out. So let's see if I can figure out how to do this. There we go. So I'm going to stop that share. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker, Monique Liguori. Did I pronounce it right?
You did.
Liguri. She is the director of the Suisun Wildlife Center and has spent many years looking for hummingbirds all over the US and in Central and South America. She has an exciting presentation. She sent it to me, and I'm going to be actually showing it because she's worried about the bandwidth at her home. But Monique is going to be talking. Everyone else, if you can mute your different, let's see, if you can mute your microphones, then we don't get feedback during the conversation. And if you have a question for Monique, just unmute yourself and ask your question. Monique, would you prefer to have questions at the end or throughout? What's your druthers?
That either way would be fine with me. If folks have questions they'd like in the moment, I'd be happy to answer them.
And the other thing you can do is to type your question into the chat, and then that will pop up and Monique can see it and I can see it, and she'll maybe be able to answer it right away. So that's another way to have your questions asked. So we have quite a few people here. So without further ado, I'm going to pull up Monique's. Let me just take this and quit. Let me take this and quit. And take this and quit. There we go. We have full power here. And then Monique, oh, let's see, I think I didn't do that quite right. Let me share the screen. Oh, let's see. There we go. And there, we're going to share that. And now we're going to present it. There we go. So Monique, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and talk with all of you about one of my passions, which are hummingbirds. I would also like to thank everyone in the club before we get started for your assistance to us after our fire at the Wildlife Center last year. It was very much appreciated. I also want to mention that we are having on November 13th, what we're calling our reopen house, the first event we've had since COVID and the fire. So if any of you can join us then, we would certainly love to have you there November 13th, 10 to 3. And I will get a flyer to Mark so he can circulate it to the club. As I mentioned, hummingbirds are one of my very favorite birds. In the interest of full disclosure, I do have to admit that I am not the photographer here. My husband is the photographer. Almost all of these pictures are his, except for a few in public domain and some drawings you folks will see. Next. We might say that hummingbirds are the peak of creation. Everything about them is spectacular and extreme. Their sparkling beauty is only part of what makes them so special. They live at the limits of what is possible. Next. The 367 species of hummingbirds are found only in the Western Hemisphere, from Alaska to Argentina. They include the smallest of all birds, the bee hummingbird of Cuba at 1.6 grams, but there's a large range of sizes from 20 grams down to 2 grams. Next. The largest is the giant hummingbird, found in South America, which is up to 8 3/4 inches, larger than the house sparrow. The giant hummingbird is nearly twice the size of any other hummingbird and often perches on the large flower heads they like to eat from, so they can conserve energy that way. Next. The speed and maneuverability of hummingbirds require a great deal of power, and the smallest hummingbirds have among the highest metabolic rate of any warm-blooded vertebrate. Next. This is because of their small size and high body temperature, around 102 to 108. Small warm bodies lose heat more quickly than bigger, cooler ones because they have a higher surface to mass ratio, or I like to say more outside, less inside. And I'm small, so I kind of get it. You definitely get colder if there's not a lot of you. Next. To keep them fueled, hummingbirds must eat a huge amount of food, up to several times their weight in nectar and insects in a day, which creates some interesting problems for us in rehabilitation, as you folks will see a little bit later. Next. This nectar is processed in 15 to 20 minutes, and then it's time for more. And that's where the rehab problems come in, but it's great work. Next. To conserve energy at night, hummers must go into a state of torpor where their body temperature drops to near that of the surrounding air. It's especially necessary for very small hummingbirds who live at very high altitudes, and they do, and there's some very good reasons for that. Next. Torpor enables birds weighing in at only 2 grams to survive cold and frosty nights in the high Andes Mountains in South America. And they're very effective at being up there for a few reasons we'll talk a little bit more about. Next. The tool of the hummer's trade is its bill. Hummingbird bills come in different shapes and sizes. Next. But they can be divided into 2 main groups, one with the long and curved bill like the green hermit, and the short straight bill of the Tyrian metaltail. Next. The sharply curved bill of the sickle bill fits the heliconia flowers that it feeds from perfectly. This is a species that's obligate feeder. This is its main flower that it uses, and they're perfectly evolved to fit together. Next. The most incredible example, of course, of the bill is a sword-billed hummingbird whose giant bill is about half its total length. It's a really incredible little tool to watch them work with. Next. In proportion, they're the longest billed bird in the world, and it needs to perch, as you see it here, with its head tilted back so it doesn't tip over. They feed on flowers with long downward hanging blossoms, perching or hovering below them. For the necessary protein, fat, and other nutrients all hummingbirds need, they also catch insects on the wing and on plants. Watching them use that bill on the wing is quite an incredible experience. Next. Inside those incredible bills are equally amazing tongues that allow them to take in nectar at 15 licks per second. And you can see how the tongue works. It comes out there on the top. All the little barbules curl in, gather the nectar, and pull it back into their mouth. They have really interesting little tongues to watch when they're using them as we get them to be self-feeding. Next. Like a woodpecker's, a hummingbird's tongue is extremely long, wraps all the way around the back of the head so that they can extend it deeply into the flowers, like woodpeckers do when they go after insects in wood. If you look at the little guy down there with his bill open, you can see that his tongue is actually in that divided posture that we saw on the diagram of the tongue. Next. Many flowers have evolved to attract hummingbirds. Most of them are red or have red parts that are conspicuous to hummingbirds, but not to insects. And they don't want to draw the insects. They want to draw the hummingbirds. We'll see why. Next. These flowers bloom in the day, have long tubular corollas that fit a hummingbird's bill, and they don't have scent or landing platform because that would attract insects. Next. They benefit in turn from being pollinated by the birds. You can see the pollen on this one's bill. Next. And this little guy's got a whole face full here. He has literally had his face in that flower all the way up to the bill in pollen. The advantage of being pollinated by hummingbirds instead of insects is that birds are active in all weather, where insects are inactive when it's too wet or too cold. And there are many more plants pollinated by hummingbirds in the highlands than in the lowlands. They're very effective in high altitudes. Next. Hovering at flowers to feed has required hummingbirds to develop the most efficient and unique flight of all birds. They're powered by a heart that is the largest of all animals. 2.5% of their body weight is their heart, the largest of all animals. Go ahead. Next. 250 beats per minute is the hummer average heart rate, which increases to about 1,220 beats per minute in flight. When they go into torpors to survive through the night, the heart rate drops along with the body temperature. They just really go all the way under. Next. Birds have the greatest oxygen demand of all vertebrates. Besides the lungs, they have air sacs that are basically extensions of the lungs. Hummingbirds have 9. Other birds have as few as 6 or as many as 12. This system is very effective. It provides them with a constant supply of oxygen, and it also allows birds to live and fly in those oxygen depleted high altitudes that we've been talking about hummingbirds being so well adapted for. Next. These adaptations all support the energy levels it takes to beat wings up to 200 times per second. Hummingbirds are the only birds that can generate lift on both the forward and the backward stroke of the wing, made in a figure 8, which is what we're seeing here in this diagram, how the wing actually goes into a figure 8 with the wings fully extended. Next. Other birds only generate lift on the forward stroke, while the backward stroke is made with partly folded wings and gives no lift. So they are only half as efficient as hummingbirds are. Next. Hummingbird wings are rigid with a very short upper bone. You'll see right at the base of the skull, it points to the humerus, analogous to the humerus in our upper arms. But theirs is very, very small, and they have an amazing articulated shoulder joint that allows for rotation of nearly 180 degrees, which enables them to perform the feats of dexterity that they have in flight. Next. This shoulder flexibility enables the bird to turn over its wings on the back stroke with the front edge of the wing leading on both strokes and creating lift. And I think you can see that most clearly in the top bird there. That is the front edge of his wing coming back there and providing lift on the back stroke as well as the front stroke. And they're pretty great little acrobats. Next. The hummingbird wing, because of being articulated only at the shoulder, is more like an insect wing than other bird wings, and their flight is only equaled by insects like dragonflies, hawk moths, hoverflies that have that same rigid structure of the wings. Next. The hummingbird's method of flying does have one major limitation. The smaller a wing, the faster it must beat to produce enough downward thrust. So the littler you are, the faster you've got to beat those wings. An average sized hummingbird beats them 25 times per second. Next. But our bee hummingbird that we saw earlier from Cuba at 2 inches, not much larger than a bumblebee, beats its wings at an astonishing 200 beats per second. But there is a limit to the speed at which an electrical impulse can pass down a nerve to trigger a muscle. The bee hummingbird's wing beat is at the edge of that limit. There can be no smaller flying bird. So that's what we mean about them living on the edge. Next. Now for the eye candy. This is a fiery-throated hummingbird from Costa Rica. I think one of the most beautiful hummingbirds that I've ever seen. Costa Rica has some wonderful hummingbirds. I highly recommend it. Next. Hummingbirds are famous for their gorgeous iridescent colors, perhaps more than anything else. I just love this picture. I think this is something we don't get to see closely enough often. Next. The males are usually the most brilliant, and because of their bravery and beauty, the Aztecs believed that a fallen warrior would be reincarnated as a glittery, aggressive hummingbird. Aztec rulers wore ceremonial robes of hummingbird feathers. Must have taken a lot of hummingbirds. I don't even like to think about it. Next. The beautiful colors of the iridescences are created differently than most feather colors. Most feather colors are created from pigments, chemicals in the feathers. These feathers are created through iridescence. Next. The reflective hummingbird colors are created by the structure of the feather, and the color is caused by light interference. That's why the color is seen often only at certain angles, and this bird could easily just look black. The thin platelets of feathers in the color, in the feathers act like mirrors. And go ahead. Sorry, Mark. Next. The thin platelets of colors in the feathers act like mirrors, and on the throat or the head, they concentrate the color directly in front, as you can see here, to be seen by a rival male in a confrontation. They are not happy with each other. I suspect that the one on the right above is a young one, and he might be taking on a little bit more than he can handle there. Next. In contrast, the iridescent green on the backs we see of many hummers is caused when the mirrors in the feathers are curved instead of flat, and the color is more scattered than focused like we saw on the heads of the males. Next. Iridescent flight feathers are not too frequently seen because the structure that produces the color weakens the feathers. So they're usually in places where they're not critical to the bird's flight, but there are a couple of exceptions. Next. This is the great Sapphire wing, and he has those beautiful iridescent wings there. He is a large hummingbird, so he beats his wings at a slow rate of around 25 beats per second, not as hard on the feathers as 200 beats a second. Next. The brilliant colors and spectacular display flights of the male serve two purposes: to defend his territory and to attract a female. Males attract the females with giant swooping dives through the sky and hover in front of the female, showing off their bright colors. Even with all his beauty and speed, she is the one who will make the choice of a mate. Next. Females are usually colored in shades of more camouflaged green, but a few are quite different from the males and very striking. When they were first discovered, some of these were thought to be a completely different species of hummingbird. I personally think the female purple-throated mountain gem is just as pretty as the male. They're both gorgeous birds. Next. The usually much plainer female, however, will make the choice of a male after she has completed her nest by herself. Nests are constructed from soft, strong materials like down, feathers, lichens, and spider webs. Next. They are carefully constructed and covered with lichen and other materials to make them blend in so well, they are practically invisible even if you are very close. This particular nest here we saw in a road cut in Costa Rica. We were looking for a trogon up higher on the hill and walked back and forth in front of this several times before we finally saw her sitting there. I guess she was enjoying the traffic going by. I don't know. Next. She will lay 2 eggs. That's all they can ever have. Incubate them and raise her babies with no help. They will have an incubation period before hatching of 15 to 22 days, which is longer than many songbirds. They have an extended period of development. Next. The babies are born naked with eyes closed and soon sprout pin feathers, structures where the feather is covered by a protective sheath. This is actually a pair of Annas that we raise. So you'll see them a little bit later, a little bit bigger. In fact, I believe it's the next one. Next. Yes, it is. 21 days is the time most hummingbirds spend in the nest, and they're alert and preening at about 16 days old. When starting to test their wings, the babies hold on to the edge of the nest and buzz their wings, and eventually off they go. I think that's how a lot of them end up on the ground and come to the Wildlife Center. Next.
So to me, it's really amazing to go from, let's see if I can make this work. I guess I can. I was going to go this way. Yeah. Here. These little tiny pin feathers to here in less than 3 weeks or 3 weeks. That's really amazing.
They develop very quickly, which is good because it's hard work. It's not hard, it's just constant. I'll explain. Okay, go ahead, Mark. We receive baby hummingbirds to raise every year at the Wildlife Center, which must go into home care as they require feeding from dawn to dusk every 15 to 20 minutes. So at this point in time, my husband and I do the home care for the babies. I started in about 1982 or 3. Home caring for hummingbirds. So again, it's not difficult work, it's just constant, and it's hard to maintain a train of thought to do anything else. They usually come in pretty hungry and gaping for food, and they're kept in covered baskets like you see here, which is typical for our baby birds, and fed until they're self-feeding from a catheter tip on a syringe, and then they can actually start to fly around inside that basket there. So when they're self-feeding, flying around pretty well, my husband makes little perches that go in there, then they're ready to move up. Next. And after the baskets, they go into the 1 foot by 1 foot mesh cube you see there on the top. There are perches and syringes in there to feed from, and they have more room to fly. Last stop before freedom is the 4x4 pop-up outside. Here, the juvenile hummingbirds can acclimate to outside temperatures, natural light cycles. Next. And then they are set free. And that's a good day because it's tough to do those every 15-minute things. When the birds are released, it's in an area where there are a lot of hummingbird feeders, which they've already learned to eat from, to help them make the transition to freedom. There are also lots of flowers that they can eat from. So let's take a look at the hummingbirds found in North America. Next. The ruby-throated hummingbird, the only hummingbird that breeds east of the Mississippi. I think they're a little impoverished out there. Next. The blue-throated hummingbird, found in streamside habitat and mountain canyons. The blue-throated hummingbird is North America's heaviest hummingbird. Interesting distinction. Next. White-eared hummingbird. The lovely white-eared hummingbird is a bird of higher elevations. A lot of these birds don't quite make it to California, but some of them occasionally do. Next. Lucifer's hummingbird. The name Lucifer does not refer, of course, to the devil, but comes from the bird's Latin name of Calothorax Lucifer. Lucifer literally means light-bearing, and he certainly is a lovely thing. Next. Buff-bellied hummingbird. These attractive birds range through Mexico to Belize and Guatemala. The best place to see them is down in the Rio Grande Valley and breed in southeastern Texas. Next. Plain-capped starthroat. This large hummingbird with a long bill is found mostly in Arizona and ranges from western Mexico to Costa Rica. Next. Lovely, the violet-crowned hummingbird. The striking violet-crowned has a breeding range from Mexico into Arizona and New Mexico, and it has been observed in California, so fingers crossed. I think everybody, all birders have heard the joke that goes, every bird in North America will eventually come to California, and it will probably beat a point race. That's the way I heard it anyway. Next. The Beryllian hummingbird. The name Beryllian comes from the word beryl or emerald for its emerald green underparts. Next. Broad-billed hummingbirds. We were recently in our New Mexico cabin and saw a lot of these guys. It's been reported that broad-billed hummingbirds that nest in arroyos or canyons build nests that look like the clumps of plants that get caught in an arroyo when water comes through. I'd love to see a nest that looked like that. Doesn't seem very hummingbirdish. Next. Rivoli's hummingbird. The large Rivoli's can be over 5 inches and is a mountain nester. The finder, the bird discoverer of the Rivoli's, named it after his financial sponsor, the Count of Rivoli, and Anna's hummingbird was named after the sponsor's wife. These guys used to be called the Magnificent Hummingbird, which I kind of prefer that name. Next. Broad-tailed hummingbird. This species nests at high altitude and is known to nest in the same location year after year, building a new nest on top of the old one. Again, odd nesting behavior for hummingbirds. Next. Costa's hummingbird. California has 6 species of hummingbirds that breed here and one that is resident, the Annas. Costa's hummingbird prefers drier habitats than any other North American hummer, and its nests are typically located far from water, which doesn't make a lot of sense either. Next. Calliope hummingbird. The calliope is the smallest breeding bird in North America. Its Latin name, stellula, means little star. They sure are cute. Next. Black-chinned hummingbird. The purple band of color that this bird is you see on these birds underneath the black chin can be difficult to see unless the light is just right. This is another one that you can easily lose that iridescence. Next. Rufous hummingbirds. Rufous hummingbirds travel farther north than any other hummingbird in North America, up to Canada and Alaska. They're usually seen here, as you all probably know, when they migrate north in spring and south again in fall. And their wings make a high-pitched trill when they're flying. I always love hearing that. Next. Allen's hummingbird. Male Allen's hummingbirds have a green back instead of the rufous back of the rufous hummingbird, and they also produce a trill from the wings. The Allen's and rufous hummers are related in the genus Selasphorus, or flame-bearing. Next. Everybody's favorite. This is the only hummingbird species in North America where the entire population is resident, the Anna's hummingbirds. They will move to higher altitudes to take advantage of seasonal flowers in the mountains. Next. The Annas are extending their range to the north, even into very cold areas. Hummers are tough little birds. Next. The names we have given hummingbirds are as fantastic and extravagant as they are. Many describe one of their features, like the booted racket tail with its fluffy boots. Next. The collared Inca. Next. The wire-crested thorntail, and they do sometimes have a wire crest. This one just doesn't. Next. The lesser violet ear. We saw the sparkling violet ear earlier. Next. The violet-tailed sylph. Next. The white-necked Jacobin, and I know that doesn't seem like very much, but there is a little bit of white there on the back of the neck. I think they could have found a better identifying feature for this lovely bird. Next. The purple-bibbed white tip. Next. The black-bellied hummingbird, one of the few black hummingbirds. I believe there are only about 3 black hummingbirds. Next. And the striped-tailed hummingbird. Next. No names can really describe the beauty and brightness of hummingbirds. There are emeralds, sapphires, rubies, topazes, sunbeams, blossom crowns, star frontlets, fairies, coquettes, and brilliants like this green-crowned brilliant. Next. An immature green-crowned brilliant is still brilliant. Next. Here we have a fawn-breasted brilliant, very different color scheme, lovely bird. Next, a tourmaline sun angel, another beautiful name. Next, a bronze-tailed plumelet. You can tell them by the little pink feet if you're ever looking for one of them. Next, velvet purple coronet. Next, an Andean emerald. Next, and a black crested coquette. Next. In English, hummingbird is our name for these birds, but other languages have different names for them. Our favorite is the Brazilian name, beija-flor, or flower kisser, and they certainly are. Next. For the big finish, the marvelous spatule tail. The name says it all. Next. Incredible bird, isn't he? Thank you, folks, for your attention. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. I really enjoyed sharing this with you. And again, we appreciate all the help that you've given us over the years and are very grateful to you. Mark, I will turn it back over to you.
Oh, do we have questions
Yes.
for Monique? So I'm going to, did I stop sharing? Can you see? Let's see. I'm going to unmute folks, I think. I'm still getting used to Zoom, you guys, so bear with me. Yeah, that's not what I wanted. Let's see. More, isn't it there? Pause recording. Well, I don't know. I think you can unmute yourselves. So let's see.
Well, Mark, I could ask a question.
Sure.
Monique, what is the lifespan of the Annas?
They can live to be about 10 to 12 years old.
Do they breed throughout the year or in the warmer months, or how does that work?
They will have more than one set of babies over the summer, but fortunately for us, they do shut it down at the end of summer because birds, it's all about day length and when they breed. We're running into right now at the Wildlife Center, we have still been getting this month baby animals. I've just sent a baby jackrabbit to our wildlife care director that I had for her to put with one. She had tiny babies in October. With the mammals, the seasons just seem to get longer and longer, and the time in between seasons shorter and shorter. But the birds, fortunately, do quit.
Let me get it for you. Hello? Right here.
We couldn't hear that last person. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello, Mark?
Yes. Roberto.
Roberto. Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, and let me know if I am. And this is a wonderful presentation, Monique.
Thank you.
I am very grateful you did that because we have hummingbirds both in our front and backyard, and we've had them for years.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to figure out how I can help the Audubon to get people more excited about helping hummingbirds for many reasons. As you said,
Mhm.
they're pollinators. They do a lot of things for us. They're territorial, but they do a lot of things for the environment,
Mhm.
But I wanted just to say 2 points for you, if you don't mind. Going
Sure.
back to what you said earlier. Number one is that you didn't mention this, but I want to mention it because my background, I'm a librarian, and I just want to say this to all of you. There's a great book that I read, and it's about 350 pages. It's called The Green in the Glitter, The Glitter in the Green, excuse me. And you can find it at the library in Solano County. It's a great book. Read it. It's for somebody who went all over the world looking for all the species that you talked about. I can't remember the author, but it's well known. The other thing I want to say to you, and I hope you don't mind me saying this too, is that you talked about the importance of the hummingbird in Aztec, Empire, culture or whatever it was, and back in the 1500s, excuse me. I just want to say too that the Aztec name, the Nahuatl name for the hummingbird is Huitzilopochtli, which was the god of war.
Mhm.
Okay, and the Aztecs, for some reason, I'm still trying to figure this out myself. They associated the whole concept of warfare as a form of sacrifice. It
Mhm.
wasn't like we understand it today, which is, we progressed to total warfare. I won't go deep into it, but there was a big difference when the Spaniards came. They were shocked by what the Aztecs were doing. But when you consider what the Spaniards did in Mexico, there's no comparison,
Mhm.
So again, I just want to say that with a grain of salt. I'm not a historian or anything, but
Mhm.
anyway, the other thing I wanted to say to you, I'm trying to think, anyway, I won't say more, but it's great that you're doing this. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank
And
you.
by the way, both my wife want to pursue this with the Audubon locally here, so we can get people to like yourself who really go all out to raise hummingbirds and get them before we're destroying the environment as far as I'm concerned. And I won't go into the development part of it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do about it. Just few people get into trouble for doing it, like myself.
So
But
Monique,
anyway, that's it.
Points.
Monique, a couple
it.
of people have asked some great questions.
Mhm.
One is, are there any concerns about having hummingbird feeders in your yard?
Not that I'm aware of. The main thing people need to do is keep them clean. And, I don't have to say that to Audubon people, they know that. And we always tell people just sugar and water. Don't use the red stuff you can buy that has the dyes in it. The hummingbirds don't need that. It's not good for them. 2 parts or 3 parts water, 1 part sugar, and boil it up. But I keep hummingbird feeders up all the time because, again, our hummingbirds are resident in California. They don't leave for the winter. So I don't typically have as many in the winter as I do in summer, but they spread out in the fall, I think.
So Lucas and I have had the privilege of going to the home of the Wyatts who live in Tamales.
Mhm.
And they have about 7 or 8 feeders in their yard and beautiful plants.
Mhm.
And at any given time, there can be 65 to 80 hummingbirds
Wow.
feeding at their hummingbird feeders. It's truly phenomenal. So they do live closer to the coast. I think sometimes that attracts
Mhm.
some of the migrants that move a little bit. But
Mhm.
they've also, last year they had a ruby-throated hummingbird.
Wow.
And some years we believe they've had black-chinned hummingbirds on the
Very
coast.
cool.
So those are both really rarities there.
Well, we did get a rufous in for raising this year, which is not common for us. And it came from Vallejo, the western part of the county, as opposed to the eastern part of the county.
We started hummingbird feeders a few years back, and last year, for the first time, we had 3 male rufuses on our feeder at the same time. It was
Yeah.
really, truly amazing. And then after they left, some females came through.
Mhm.
So it was for whatever reason, last year was a great year for rufous hummingbirds. And typically we'll get a couple of Allens that will visit.
Mhm.
Allens tend to nest right along the coast, and the rufous migrate up along the
Mhm.
coast of California up to further northern spots. Courtney asked a really great question, which is, she saw many hummingbirds in Peru.
Mhm.
And could you talk just a little bit about places where you've gone to see hummingbirds, and have you been to Peru? Is that one of the places you've been to research hummingbirds?
I have not, and I would love to go there because that marvelous spatule tail we saw in those last two slides can only be found in a very limited area of Peru. I started out on the Rio Grande coast, other than just all over the west, but to get down to the southern parts, we started there. And then we went to Ecuador, which is where you see the things like the swordbill. That's where those pictures are from. Ecuador is wonderful for all kinds of birds, but it has very wonderful hummingbirds. And then we went to Costa Rica, which I can't recommend highly enough to any birder who hasn't been there for all the birds, but the hummingbirds are just wonderful. And we went to Brazil then and did the Pantanal trip and that kind of thing. So we saw a lot of hummingbirds down there as well. And then we went back to Costa Rica again and took a second trip to Brazil to the Atlantic forest, where you have a whole different range of species. So yeah, I would love to do more, but travel's been a little difficult here for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Courtney, did that answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That was great. I mean, they were the biggest hummingbirds I'd ever seen. I think they
Wow.
were, you talked about that range between 2.5 to 8, and I'm sure they were closer to the 8
Mhm,
8-inch.
mhm.
They were huge. I
They
guess
have
that's
some
their
big ones.
their national bird or something, but they were spectacular. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Those are great questions. Go ahead, Len.
Is there something you can put under your hummingbird feeder to catch dripping, which otherwise is going to go possibly on foliage?
Oh, that's a good question, and I've never had that question before. I would think you could find a way, because most of them have that ring around the feeder for the birds to sit on, and maybe you could suspend something from that underneath it, like a cottage cheese lid, something like that, that you could just hang down from it. I don't know, you need something to be fairly light, so that's why I'm thinking plastic. Maybe you'd want something bigger than that, but a Frisbee?
Well, I just thought if I didn't ask, everyone would say, well, yes, we use so-and-so.
Yeah, I think you could probably hang something underneath to catch it. They're pretty sturdy little structures.
So another great questions come up is, are there any specific plants that attract hummingbirds as well?
Anything red tubular flowers, any kind of red tubular flowers, they really like those. We've put in some stuff at the center, some yarrows and things like that. We did a garden that we have to redo now since the fire with sustainable Solano for hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. And, just anything with those red tubular flowers is always good. They like that a lot. And there's one actually called Hummingbird Flower, which makes it simple.
So we've watched, let me make sure I'm telling you correctly. Yeah, we've watched Calliope hummingbirds in this high up in the mountains feed on penstemons. And they have a tubular, there's a lot of red penstemons, and they will go up on, like she was saying, they go to very dry locations, and they will feed on penstemons that are coming out of granite, basically granite cliffs. Anything else? Could you just talk, let's see, Any other native plants that you can think of?
what
Is there-
time
If there's
is it?
anyone here that's into native plants, go ahead and add.
Yeah, if anybody else
information if
is
you have
more
it.
familiar.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This isn't a native plant question, but I've just recently this year started having feeders on my back deck. I have 4 feeders, 16 ounce, and I'm getting mostly Anna's hummingbirds. I'm in Napa, California, and daily they drain all 4 feeders and have to clean and refill, and I love it. My question is, winter's coming up. And what am I to expect as far as volume or attendance by the hummingbirds during the winter time? Will it stay the same, increase? It's my first winter, so I'm just wondering.
It sounds like you've got a wonderful environment for them, so I would think that they would hang around.
I hope so.
But some of the, I think it's the young males that tend to disperse in fall. But I don't know that their intake will probably slow down some. I don't think you'll be going through quite the amount of food you are now.
But they won't be going away in the winter.
No, they're resident. They're going to hang right there where you've got a good thing going for them.
Monique,
Excellent.
one thing you said was a ratio of 2 or 3 cups of water to 1 cup of sugar.
Parts, yeah.
I've used 1 to 4, so it's probably too diluted, and the hummingbirds have not come as often as they used to come. So maybe I need to strengthen it.
I use 2 parts, or 2 parts water, 1 part sugar.
Is that right? 2 parts to 1?
Okay, he's saying 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. So
No, I that's what I've been doing, but I haven't really studied up on it. So it's possible mine is too weak, and that's why they're choosing flowers over my hummingbird feeders.
it could be. I know in Brazil, they make their hummingbird formula a lot stronger than we make ours. They make it 3 to 1. And that's where I was getting the 3 to 1 from. In Brazil, they make it quite a bit stronger. So you can kick it up. It won't hurt them.
Okay.
Mine are 4 to 1, and they just drink it down. I mean, maybe it's too weak. That's why they drink so much. But it makes it easier to, But since I've started, it's always been 4 to 1, and they love it, and they're back every day, and it's great.
Well, they've got personalities just like everybody else, and preferences, and you definitely see that when you work with the baby critters.
So someone named Leslie asked if hummingbirds eat bugs, which I think you referred to in your speech.
Yes, they do. They have to have protein, and that's they eat all the tiny little gnats you folks see around your backyards and places. They eat just tons of those things because they, as I mentioned, have to eat several times their own weight in sugar water or nectar, let's put it that way, and insects every day.
Monique, can you just talk a little bit about the Wildlife Center and the work that you are doing there?
We're still working to come back from the fire in 2020. We've rebuilt some of our structures. We've rebuilt. One of our squirrel cages was burned. Right now we're working on new songbird aviaries with labor from the Fairfield Suisun Rotary Club. And the next thing we will do is rebuild the display aviary that we lost our 2 great horned owls in. We've been fortunate enough to be able to get grant funding, and we're working with both our local Sierra Club and the chapter, the group here in our area, and the chapter, which is larger. And we're working with, as I mentioned, Fairfield Suisun Rotary and Cordelia Rotary. So we still have a ways to go, but again, we're excited about being able to have our event in November. It's the first time we've been able to welcome our friends to the Wildlife Center for a mighty long time. And we're a small organization, and some of us, like myself, have been around for many years.
Hear this, and you have it.
I've had it. It's fine.
Oh. So let's see, would the hummingbirds be inclined to drink more nectar if it was too diluted? Oh, that was Len's question. I'm not sure.
I don't
That's a
know.
really good question.
I do not know. Like I say, they seem to be okay with a range. You know, as I said, they go real heavy on the sugar in Brazil, but we don't. And our hummingbirds certainly eat our formula. So I think there's a range within which they're happy to take what we have to offer them.
Okay, great. Any more questions?
Mark, I have one question, if I may.
Yes.
Okay. Monique, or Mark, if you know, can you say anything about the relationship that I'm hearing about hummingbirds and climate change? I'm hearing because hummingbirds they can tolerate colder weather.
Mhm.
They seem to be moving more north. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
It seems to be, yeah. As I showed the one picture of the Annas way up north. They've gone considerably farther north. So yeah, I think that's kind of, and you folks there are probably a lot of you who are more expert on this than I am, but birds that's all over seem to be going farther north every year.
I think there's quite a few species of hummingbirds in the desert as well.
Mhm.
So I think they can tolerate quite a bit of heat as long as they have flowers, as long as they can find the nectar.
Mhm.
Before we go any longer
Thank
and
you.
lose any more participants, I'd like to remind folks our next speaker is Thursday, November 11th. And it is a friend of mine, Keith Hansen, who has just published a book, Field Guide to Birds of the Sierra Nevada. This is his latest edition of that book, and he did all of these magnificent drawings with it, and he's going to share the book with you. He is an artist and author who lives in Benicia, and I've been on his Christmas bird count with him. So I've learned a lot from Keith. He's an incredible birder and one of the Benicia birders that finds so many great birds over along the coast. So hopefully you can join us on Thursday, November 11th for Keith Hansen and Birds of the Sierra Nevada. So we're looking forward to that. It is Veterans Day. I don't know how many people have that as a holiday, but it'd be a great way to cap off a holiday by listening to Keith. He's an incredible storyteller, and I'm sure he will entertain us a month from today. Any other last questions for Monique before we let her go?
Mark,
have
I have
a
one more
couple.
question.
Phil?
Okay, I can wait. I can yield it to somebody else, but
Yeah,
I do have a quick one for her. She talked about going down to South America or so. Monique, did you go to the Nazca Plains? Because as you know, I think a lot of people know that there is this gigantic rendition of a hummingbird out there. And I don't know, nobody seems to know why it's there.
I
And my
did not
question,
get
did you
there. I
see
would
anything?
love to.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you.
Oh, certainly.
Did I see a hand, Phil?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I'm actually Phil's wife, Emily.
There you
And
go.
I wanted to know if anybody has experienced hummingbirds seeming to recognize the person who fills their feeder. At my house, they seem to fly right in front of my nose when their
They know
feeder
you.
volume gets too low.
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
thought
they
so.
know you.
And
They
then
know the
Especially when
person
you're
in
coming
feeds
out with
them.
food.
a lot of the last few years I've been sheltering in place in the very southern part of Oregon, about 8 miles north of the California border. And I think it was several years back, we had 35 or 40 swarming our two feeders. And then they just suddenly seemed to disappear. So those, and I think it was mostly Rufus and Allens we
Mhm.
would get. And so are they migratory? Is that why they just disappeared? Most of them disappeared?
Mhm. Yeah, they just come through and keep going usually a lot of the time.
Yeah, I was afraid I was poisoning them with, with
I don't-
a feeder that wasn't clean enough.
I don't know if
Good.
Monique mentioned this, but I think it's the Allens I'll have to look it up to be sure. But one of them has an incredibly long migration route.
Yeah.
And I believe
yeah.
it's the Allens. And they go, as she was saying, they were moving way north. Let me just look.
Alaska, yeah.
Sure I've got the right, they reach all the way to Alaska, but they
Mhm.
also, oh, unfortunately, this doesn't show. I believe they migrate way down into South America. So they
Mhm, I
have a
think so too.
tremendously long
Wow,
migration route.
wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, great. I appreciate everyone's time. And I've learned so much from you, Monique. It was a really exciting presentation. We thank everyone for attending. We had a great audience, over 50 people. And it's wonderful to see so many faces. We're looking forward to next month's with Keith Hansen. And we hope you'll join us for one of our weekly walks where we apologize. We've had to cancel tomorrow, but all of our leaders are out of town. But we will come back the following week. And in addition, we have monthly field trips. So look for email blasts. If you don't receive the field trip blasts, you need to sign up on the website and ask specifically to receive that communication on field trips. And then you will get the blasts whenever they come out. So we have a server that serves those out to everyone that's signed up for information on field trips. So that's on our website. So look there for more information. We've been trying really hard to keep our website up to date. It's a chore, but we're doing better than we have been doing. So visit it regularly and you'll see updates and events that are coming up. Thank you very much. And again, if you're interested in helping out with the Christmas bird count, please give me a call and I'll get you in touch with Robin or Murray, depending on where you live and which count you're interested in. Thank you very much for attending, everyone, and keep learning about birds. Go out. It's beautiful weather right now to go looking for birds, and we're sort of near the tail end of fall migration, but there's still migrants coming through. We did send out a rare bird alert when Point Reyes was just completely blowing up with migrants. Lots of eastern warblers were coming through, chestnut-sided, black and white. They've had red starts, American red starts. They've had magnolias. So, and we even got to see a Virginia's warbler, which is really pretty much an Arizona, New Mexico warbler, came to Point Reyes for a few days at the New Willows. So, and get out there, go to Point Reyes, go to local birding spots, Lake Hennessy, Benicia State Park, Benicia Community Park, and Lake Herman. Lake Herman has a rare bird that's been there the last few weeks called an Eastern Phoebe. And it's somewhere below the caretaker's house near the parking lot. If you go down the trail that goes in front of the house, it goes down into a riparian area, and the Phoebe has been hanging out there. So go take a look and find some new birds. So thank you very much for coming.
Mark.
And we wish
Thank
everyone
you.
a good night.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Take care.